Hello there. Welcome back to Charles Circle and welcome back to Captain of Industry. Last time, we launched our first rocket. We officially have a space station in orbit, and as long as we can afford to keep launching rockets to supply maintenance parts, we'll maintain a small bonus to Unity and to research. But it's just the first step in our space program. Today, we need to make sure that our base's economy is in a position to take the next step in the space program. We've got a pretty robust setup in general, but there are a few persistent issues that are making this ride a bit more bumpy than it needs to be. Those are 1, power, 2, food, and 3, our refinery balance. On power, we added about 50 megawatts of consumption last time, mostly in the aluminum processing module that we created over here. These massive machines over here at 8 megawatts each account for obviously the vast majority of that, but there's a lot more of supporting machinery that got added along the way as well. And while we added a few dozen kilowatts in solar, it wasn't quite enough to offset that entire massive increase in consumption. 2, on food, I think this is just a transport issue. We talked briefly about this. We need to adjust our train station. This was always intended to be a temporary location because we wanted to actually move this over and connect it directly to the food markets once we had finished remodeling in this area. We never really got around to doing that because it was fine, but it's gotten worse over time. The issue here is actually not the truck traffic running back and forth here, although certainly it would be better if we didn't have to do that, if we directly piped or conveyor belted, rather, all of these goods into the markets. The issue is actually train traffic. So we knew that these were going to be high volume, high turnaround trains, and we have a couple on each of those 2 lines. But the issue here is, while we gave them a nice bypass on the way in, we do force them to run through this main traffic spine on the way back. And there's a lot of trains that operate on that route. So there's a decent amount of traffic, and because I guess they're the furthest back, they don't have particularly high priority. So what we need to do is make sure that they have a dedicated bypass route on the return as well. I think that should help. We'll find out if that entirely solves. I believe we have enough out here for most things, maybe not everything. But a lot of these massive storages are pretty full. But we won't know if we need to reinforce any of this until we actually manage to transport it properly. So we'll need to make that adjustment as well. The third big piece, as I said, is our refinery balance. This one isn't as glaringly obvious because there isn't a bright, angry alert describing it. But we have really increased our consumption of sulfur, ammonia, and fertilizer. So we use a lot of acid, rubber, and fertilizer now. We've been using the same amount of fertilizer, right? But it's a significant chunk, to be clear. We have added a decent amount of acid consumption as we've built out these import-driven manufacturing zones, I guess, for lack of a better phrase, right? So we churn through a ton of acid over here for the nuclear setup, for gold processing, and now for aluminum as well. And of course, we're still using that in pretty high volumes over here for copper production, which has really increased. This whole setup has been online more often as we've had to more continuously be producing all of these electronics 2 in order to supply our electronics 3. So our copper consumption has absolutely increased, which indirectly means that our acid consumption has also increased. The same thing is true of rubber. Rubber is also a refinery byproduct that consumes sulfur, right? So we're using a heck of a lot more sulfur than we make just from stripping our own sour water byproduct and scrubbing our exhaust. We're also using a ton more ammonia than we used to. This is another ingredient in the fertilizer process, but it's also being used now for medical supplies too, which, spoiler alert, we are going to need as a component for supplying our space station's crew once we manage to advance to the crewed space station stage. So this is already consuming ammonia, and it's going to consume even more in relatively short order. We also use ammonia out here now to produce chemical fuel for space station parts. As you can imagine, the rate we consume those parts is not going to decrease going forward either. And because those items are now monopolizing the sulfur and ammonia that we do produce, we're nowhere near keeping up on our fertilizer production. And that's hurting our farming eco. Again, I don't think that's what's driving our food issue yet, but it may be a complicating factor that we'll need to keep in mind as we try to rebalance that throughput. It may be that once we finally have our trains running at full capacity again, we actually don't make enough because we don't have the fertility, right? We're nowhere near our target here. We don't have the fertility that we want in all of our farms. Some of these have it, some of these don't. Okay, so what are we going to do about all that? Well, we're going to address all of these things by remodeling pretty much the entire western part of our base. So the first thing we'll do is look at our refinery. So we'll expand our overall oil, like raw oil processing throughput. We are running on at least 50% boost pretty continuously, and often more than that. It's not that we don't have the unity, it's just if we're going to do this, why wouldn't we add more throughput so we can free up that unity to do something better? We'll also, beyond just what's required to expand the throughput of our oil processing, we will expand our sour water stripping capacity because we want to then import supplemental sour water to make more sulfur and ammonia to make up for any gaps that our baseline refinery process is incapable of producing. We will trade slag as an export for that sour water. This is veterans' favorite contract, or one of them, for a reason. We have a ton of slag, and we need the valuable things that you get out of sour water. We are dumping, as you can see in this darker color, slag out here constantly. We still have, I think it's 3 trains on this line, bringing it out here to throw into the ocean. And still, despite that, a very full loose storage here. It comes from all of our manufacturing areas. It's going to be pretty straightforward to bring over here, even in high volumes. So that's a better use, I think, of that byproduct. It's not like we're hurting on terraforming, and there's plenty of other chunks of island to throw around when we need to. This will be, I think, really helpful for us going forward. Now, a little bit further west, this area, I think, needs a bit of a revamp as well. It served our purposes when we were initially building it, but we need to do a few things in this area, I think, too. So our coal setup here, I think we're going to split out, basically, how we think about coal. I want this area to have its own dedicated coal supply via import. And I want our manufacturing area to take coal from this mine. And I want those to be essentially 2 separate coal supply grids, for lack of a better term. It's a lot of train traffic to be running it from here through here, again along this highly trafficked spline. And the things that we need it over here for are in some ways even more important. This entire setup takes a bit of coal. And we're also going to, in this same area then, add back a pretty decent chunk of coal power capacity to address this big gap that we have. Some of you are thinking, well, maybe you shouldn't have deleted the coal power that you used to have out here. And that's a fine thought, and believe me, I've had it a couple times too. Kind of want to remove this power I am certain we'll come to regret that. Surely we're fine, right? I don't see how we could possibly end up regretting this. But there's nothing to be done about that. We're going to have to add it back. So we'll add some in at some point in here, coming off of this import as well. I think we'll need it to be higher throughput, so we'll make this into a larger cargo depot. And I think we're going to switch to the vehicle parts 3 for coal export over here. It's a great ratio, and we do actually now have enough throughput, right? We have some of these for, maybe not explicitly for export so far, but in order to build the rocket assembly depot, we already had to set that infrastructure up, so we might as well. And then, as we mentioned, we need to adjust the food train logistics and see how that works once we have it sort of the throughput optimized. So we'll move this train station setup over here and add a turnaround and see how that improves our supply. Fingers crossed that solves it. If not, we'll figure out what else we need to do to help it out. Along the way, we're going to research a couple helpful odds and ends for our economy. First of which will be simply increasing our vehicle cap, right? We'll also be able to go up even further in our recycling efficiency for the exchange for a little bit of unity. And then finally, you may not think about this from an economic perspective, but I actually do, we're going to get the last ship upgrade because that ship upgrade will allow us to clear out these last remaining obstacles, which will unlock access to this final village, which has some contracts that we simply don't have access to quite yet, along with a few other world mines, which I suppose we could also make use of. A second uranium mine wouldn't be the worst thing in the world to have access to, given how far this is already depleted, and the fact that we don't have a contract set up quite yet. I think this settlement has that contract, but let's see. Okay. So all of these things are going to take a decent amount of time, and they're mostly adjusting builds that you've already seen. So I will likely skip time lapses for most of these adjustments, but I will certainly show you around the new version once it's laid out and explain why we made the adjustments that we did. So without further ado then, I think I'll start with the biggest piece, which is the refinery. The rationale for that is basically everything else will fit in around it. So I won't know how to remodel this area until I know where this area ends, essentially. So I have no clue how long it'll take me here, but lucky you'll get to skip ahead to the results in 3, 2, 1. Okay, folks, so this is what it looks like. It's jammed in there pretty tight, but I think we've got everything we want. I will walk you through the overall approach here, and then we'll start turning it on. It's going to take a minute. I don't quite have the Unity to instant build it, but we're going to try to speed it along as quickly as we can. So let's trace it from start to finish. So it's the exact same cargo dock. This is unchanged. We are still trading vehicle parts 2 for our crude oil. We now have a much larger buffer over here, and then it flows into our exact same setup as before, just doubled, right? So instead of 4 rows of these distillation stages 1, 2, 3, we have 8 of them. The throughput has been doubled really throughout the entire facility. That also includes these boilers, where we will be generating all the steam to run all these things. We had 2 previously, now we have 4. They're going to run on heavy oil exclusively. We'll talk a little bit more about priority for these byproducts in a moment, but that is a slight sneak preview. So out of all of these machines, of course, come our primary and then secondary byproducts. Out of this one, of course, we have heavy oil and sour water. Stage 2 is diesel, and then stage 3 is naphtha and fuel gas. What you'll notice a lot more of in this particular version compared to the last is a whole series of cracking units. And so primarily, we're going to try to get rid of all, frankly, of our heavy oil. So this entire row is heavy oil cracked using some hydrogen into naphtha and fuel gas. When we're full on naphtha, we still want to be able to crack heavy oil. And so this row, which is prioritized lower, using, you can't really see in here very well, I'm sure, but using a series of pipe balancers, when this row backs up, then and only then will this row engage, and that will make diesel. If we have excess naphtha overall, it will have its own row here where it gets cracked into diesel. Any excess fuel gas, and we'll talk about how that flows here in a moment, comes to these hydrogen reformers, where we make a bunch of hydrogen and run off some CO2, right? So why don't we want heavy oil anymore? Well, we've been slowly but surely moving all of our cargo ships over to hydrogen, as you can see. And in fact, this one, and well, now that we've replaced this over here, this is hydrogen. Really, I think, yeah, this is the last one on the map. Now, that's better, assuming that we have the products, because it's less pollution. And our ship pollution, as you can see, if I turn off all these other ones, right, increases over time because we just have more ships. So heavy oil is a dirtier source. We were happy to use it because it was a productive use for a byproduct we were getting rid of otherwise. But we can turn it into something else we prefer and then run a less pollution or lower polluting setup. And as soon as the ship rotates through this last little bit here, we'll move it to hydrogen as well. Now that said, we don't want this refinery, like the aim of this refinery is still to max out our diesel production. We're not trying to make as much hydrogen as possible from this setup just because we're moving our ships to hydrogen, and maybe other things eventually too. We're still primarily producing diesel. But anything that's left over, we will crack all the way down to hydrogen if we're full on everything else along the way. I hope that makes sense. So other things that we make along the way, well, we're going to need naphtha, right? So naphtha comes out of this last stage here, right, is only cracked over here if everything else that we can use it for, and I would show you, but just trust me, there's a series of balancers under here, if everything else that we would use it for is full. And we maintain, actually, I might change the pipes, but basically it's the same connection. We maintain over here this connection so that we can use naphtha for plastic. That's an important one for us. The other thing that we use naphtha for, which is the one thing I still haven't actually hooked up yet, but I promise I will, is rubber. And we've doubled our rubber production capacity over here. We only had 4 before, but there were times when we needed to boost all 4 of them. So we're going to have 8, and we'll run however we run, however often we run. I knew I'd forget to connect something here. Oh well, I'll get it in a moment. But if and only if our plastic and rubber storages are fully backed up and there's nothing else to use naphtha for, then we'll crack it down into, again, we're solving for diesel and some byproduct fuel gas. Same thing's going to be generally true. We make a lot of byproduct fuel gas in every single one of these cracking instances, not to mention in stage 3 itself. And we use fuel gas throughout the base, right, to burn trash, to run kilns, so on and so forth. Things we could do with hydrogen, right? But if we can do them equal value from both, why would we spend resources converting one to the other? But we spend a decent chunk of fuel gas out here supplying water, but we offset most of it, definitely not all of it, certainly not right now, with digesting excess crops. Okay, so what we actually need to do then, and we've had this functionality before, is we need to be able to buffer fuel gas. Certainly, we'd like to export it to the rest of the base, make it available, which we do over here. But if there's too much, and I mean that both within the refinery and across the base in general, if there's too much fuel gas, we need a way to dispose of it so it doesn't back up, because it is a byproduct from a lot of these processes that will jam up the works if we don't have a way to take care of it. And so that's what this is. This is not set to keep us full, but it is allowed to receive. And what it does is it runs any excess fuel gas back through a prioritized balancer to be cracked down into hydrogen here. I think this is enough capacity because it's all the way at the end of the value chain and we have room for a buffer. But if there's one of these modules that I think we're probably going to end up boosting intermittently, it's going to be this one. But I think that's okay. All right. So heavy oil, primarily used in the boiler. And if that's all full and we're still making more, then we crack it down into naphtha, unless that's full, in which case we turn it into diesel. Naphtha, primarily, we use for plastic and for rubber, and if that's full, we crack it down into diesel. Fuel gas, same thing. Any excess that we have that runs through here, if it's not being exported to the rest of the base over here, then it gets cracked down into hydrogen. All right. That's the general order of operations here. Now, what else do we do here? Well, we have sour water to process our own. We also have, so these 4 here are enough for these 8 rows. Sour water, right? One of these strippers can handle 2 of the outputs of each of these rows because it's 18 twice equals 36. So we have twice the total capacity here because we will be trading our excess slag over here for sour water. Now that contract is, the ratios are imperfect here, but it's kind of roughly 3 to 1. So we need 6 of our export slots here assigned to exporting slag, and then 2 to sour water. We will, of course, prioritize the sour water that we are producing being processed, but we'll backfill it so that we have as much sulfur and ammonia out to the rest of the base as we need. This will also produce a decent amount of water, by the way, right? This is roughly 2/3 of the water comes back, and we're not actually exporting water. So this is a net gain of water, and we'll probably need to be thoughtful about how that gets balanced out to the rest of the base and doesn't back itself up. Right now, we have it coming over here to the water supply for the boilers. It's being backed up or backfilled by this water supply out here. But I suppose there's a world where that's more water than these consume continuously. If that happens, we'll have to run the excess out somewhere else. I'm not sure exactly which side of that balance will come out on. We'll keep an eye on it. The other thing we need to do is use our nitrogen and our sulfur. And we ran out of space. So across the tracks to make fertilizer. Now, this is still the same export station. We've just moved the fertilizer production out here. And it's not really more machines. It's like a little bit more capacity than we previously had, but we're gonna be able to supply it more constantly. So I'm cautiously optimistic that this will be enough. But if we need to add, for example, a 3rd machine here in each of these, we comfortably can. And of course, if we need to expand beyond this, we also can. I just think it would be convenient if we could maintain this road. That's really the only reason I didn't build more so far. So let's see. I, again, am pretty optimistic, actually, that just being able to run these constantly instead of having to play catch up whenever we run out of sulfur or ammonia, this will actually be enough. But let's see. We'll find out. Okay. Oh, the only other thing I'll call out here, this pipe, which is actively being built, is oxygen storage, because that's important here, right? We actually used to have, over in our old setup, we had 2 air separators providing that oxygen. We were venting a ton of oxygen over here in order to make hydrogen. We had one of these smokestacks running pretty constantly right here in the center. And I thought, well, that's a bit of a waste, isn't it? Because we're running this hydrogen pretty continuously, and these 4, each making 32, feels like it should probably handle the 2x 36 on average. Let's add a buffer. And then of course we still have to vent any excess. So we have this smokestack's still here, but it was being wasted. It's no extra power to produce it this way, so why not, right? And then again, because these numbers are all weird compared to each other as far as inputs and outputs go, we have buffers in between each of these stages. But ultimately, we spit out the same highest quality fertilizer over here that we did before at the same train station with the same train line. Okay. Woo, my. So we still have plenty left to do. We actually are short a cargo dock over here because we had to destroy the coal importer in order to make room for all this. We will replace that, no problem, over here. And then we'll have to add the power. We'll have to think about how we want to be, if we want to make any changes to how we're supplying copper. I'm not sure, but let's see. And yeah, really all of this could get looked at again. This limestone train station is fundamentally unnecessary now, as is this wildly oversized limestone storage for one exhaust scrubber. Considering that our limestone export is right there, I think we could probably remove these tracks, for example, among a million other things we can probably do in this area to tighten things up. Okay, so I'm gonna turn things on. Maybe we'll keep the camera running here for a bit while we are turning things on, but this is gonna be also a bit of a slow process, so I'm sure at some point I will cut away. But let's get going, I guess. So I'm gonna start turning stuff on, starting with the most furthest upstream infrastructure. Although I will certainly unpause everything, I think we'll throw Unity at a few more important pieces along the way, because we make a ton of it, so that's nice. All right, let's get going. Oh yeah, people are gonna be a problem here, aren't they? Just to get things jump started, and especially because we're actually going to have a little bit of extra heavy oil as we sort of shake out these ships that are currently using it, I think we'll let things get dropped off. Just to get started. This will become a self-sustaining cycle here in pretty short order. Oh yeah, nice. We have aluminum scrap now too. Something we should probably account for. I think we're going to go ahead and have to take a bit of a rubber loan here just until the refinery gets back up to speed, because these are dire consequences for not having any rubber. Hopefully that helps, and then we probably need, yep, aluminum scrap sorted out over here as well. All right, so it looks like this is starting to spin up okay. I'm seeing white smoke from most of these, just temporarily. We need to let off some of this sour water into storage here, because we're not getting all the steam out here that we need just yet. Still gotta get these folks spinning up a little bit more. We really need rubber production to restart. Oh, and I need to set up naphtha for that. Hang on. We have our own rubber production going a little bit at least. Still waiting for the steam to fully catch up, even piping in a little bit extra from over here just to try to get us up off the ground before the self-sustaining loop takes effect. So far, so good though. And there is our vehicle cap research. So we're gonna get a bunch of haul trucks to start. So I'm looking at our overall usage here, and it's pretty good. I actually think we have a decent chunk of our normal trucks for transporting flat unit goods, which is great. That means we actually can, I think, put some of these trucks and maybe some more excavators into mining, terraforming, etc. So will be nice to have. All right, here we go. I think now that we've finally caught up on our own sour water processing, well, one, we can stop boosting, and two, we can actually set up this contract. So let's do that. Sour water will come in on these two, slag out on these, and let's go. Well, all right. So I think with the very obvious exception of power right now, keeping us from actually being able to run constantly, we're in pretty good shape here. So I think it's probably time to address that power issue. So I think I will dive in and do that next. We're in pretty good shape even all the way through to fertilizer. We have everything we need. The oxygen is working just fine, and all we really need now is to be able to run all of this stuff. So yeah, let me dive in and do that, and I'll be right back. Welcome back. I fixed power, but it was a bumpy road. There was a long tail of refinery-related disruptions still to sort out to our broader supply chain and everything. I think my biggest takeaway that I recommend you keep in mind when you're playing is that it's way simpler to build a new factory somewhere else before you delete the old factory. The second biggest takeaway is probably make sure your power setup is good before you add a bunch more consumption. But a close third is don't switch all of your cargo ships to hydrogen at the same time you're remodeling your refinery. We tried to do 3 kind of big changes there at once. And so that turned into playing whack-a-mole with everything from water to steel to fertilizer. Not worth going into, but the lesson remains. Build a new facility before you delete the old one unless you want to spend a few hours juggling on a high wire. With that lesson in mind, instead of trying to build the coal power that we needed over here while remodeling this area, as you can see, I still need to do most of that work, I actually ended up adding a decent chunk of coal power elsewhere. All the way over here, actually. Now, it's still using the same vehicle parts 3 import for coal, but we're doing it out here to solve 2 problems at once. The first, of course, is that we needed more power. The second is that our water supply out here has been pretty inconsistent while relying on fuel gas. This was true before the refinery revamp, but the disruption to what little supplemental fuel gas supply we could bring out here created a feed-forward loop where our crops were drying out due to lack of water, so we had less surplus crops to digest into fuel gas to keep the water loop going, right? So we backfilled actually with overflow steam from these coal boilers out here, and we're using that to fully recharge this water buffer. And I've added a few thermal desalinators here. Now, at steady state, ideally, what we'll do is have these desalinators just absorb the depleted steam outputs here, right? But we've set it up so that they can take the primary steam outputs as you can see, I'm boosting this set of boilers in order to do this in higher volume, right? And so we're charging up this fluid storage pretty quickly. So I think in the longer run, we won't need as much boosting. If we do, maybe we add 50% capacity, I'll just add a couple more of each of these relevant parts. I don't want to be boosting this longer run. I'm just convincing myself that we need to do it before I commit to adding it. This I'm pretty pleased with. This definitely solved both the power problems, because yeah, it makes a casual 30, 60, 120 megawatts not bad, and it's solved this water issue, which has been a problem for some time. I cannot tell you how many times, especially off camera, I've gone back and forth on this pipe, like flipping the direction, trying to backfill it with water from this groundwater pump set, and then, panicking and having to flip it back because this was getting depleted and we still need it to supply our water out here to the rest of the base. I've paused this pipe, but I'm actually finally comfortable deleting it and severing this connection entirely. This water grid is finally self-sufficient now, given the addition of this power plant. I also gave it a nice little nameplate using some of our new gold surface, since we have gold lying around. I was just playing around with it. A good amount of what I had to do over the last couple hours was just let time go by so that things could stabilize. So I did play around a little bit with some of the aesthetics in general. Very light stuff, but I've encased, I guess, our space center, protected it from trucks driving through at weird angles, I don't know, and then played around a little bit more with sort of creating proper roadways, especially in our more developed industrial sectors and adjacent to the settlement itself. So you can tell I definitely needed something to do with my hands while I was waiting for things to charge back up, but it worked out pretty well. The other thing I had to do, if you're ever several thousand hydrogen in debt, which we were, this is how you get out. I've paused it since, but I just slapped down, once we fixed power, just a ton of these electrolyzers. And then, because they don't take that much water, and in case you forgot, there's actually a groundwater reservoir here. This used to feed our original set of farms. I figured, you know what? We're going to remodel this area anyway. I'm going to use this space real quick to bang out a few thousand hydrogen, and that smoothed our transition very well. Now we're still making plenty of excess over here in the refinery now that the refinery is also up to speed. But if you ever need to just address a shortage, hit it with a hammer. Hit it hard. Like, if you're going to do it right. So that's what we did over here. The refinery is definitely very, very up to speed now. In fact, I've actually paused the supplemental sour water consumption because we filled up on sulfur, and that's great, obviously. But we do make sulfur elsewhere in the base that we have to consume, right? All of our exhaust scrubbers need to output sulfur somewhere. And so we say, hey, you can dump those small but important amounts here over time. And whenever this gets low, we'll just turn this whole setup back on. In the meanwhile, it's doing just fine. We have plenty of it, which is great. We're also doing great on fertilizer. I know it's empty here, but if you didn't see this when I panned out here earlier, this is fantastic. And this is true with max fertility on all of our farms, and our crop buffers are definitely recharging, which also is good to see. So we're in a pretty good spot here, and I think it's finally time. We're going to keep that power setup, so I think it's finally time to revamp this area now, which, because we don't need to add as much power over here, kind of opens things up a little bit. I've been slowly but surely deleting stuff. We're still going to need some coal in this area. As you can see, this is a temporary setup here where we're having our trucks bring in a whole bunch just so that we can keep this going in the meanwhile. But I'm not entirely sure that we'll need the volume of coal over here that we thought we did when we were expecting to add coal power in this area too. So I'll think about it, I'll play around, but I actually think we get to simplify this area vastly, which is fantastic. But there is room for a cargo dock, so we'll probably import something over here. And maybe it will be coal, and we'll just allow that to also supply, a broader set of things in this area. But let's play around and see what we come up with. In the meanwhile, everything else is looking pretty good as far as buffers and everything go. So I am actually going to turn back on our research, which I paused because, well, I was having steel problems, which, we're there now, we're back, but it's always something, right? But I think we can let that get back up to cruising altitude as well. And we'll check back in when this area has been remodeled. Curious to see how it shakes out. Talk soon. Okay, so welcome back to the new Western Docklands area. We use this space to import copper, offsetting our mining requirement just like we did with iron. And this is the appliances for copper trade. I think, it's not an incredible ratio, but there isn't one that has an incredible ratio, really. And so I think it's really kind of the best one, unless you're willing to do some one-to-one iron ore exchange, which is fine, right? There are very good ratios for things that will get you iron ore, and then if you then swap that one-to-one, you're indirectly getting the same ratio for other ores, but you do have to be willing to essentially maintain an entire second contract, right? So an entire second dock, which these are roughly 80 people, the fuel for the extra ship, the unity cost, the logistics of moving everything from one dock over to the other, even if they are right next to each other. So I'm not saying never do it, but I just didn't think it was a great deal or something to really prioritize here necessarily. So we're just going to do the appliances straight up, which is fine because we just upgraded this row and we are doing more than okay on supplying those, not just for the wood, right, that we exported for over here, but now also for copper, which is pretty nice. As expected, this area was definitely able to be cleaned up, tidied up. It has the same components as it did earlier, but it's much simpler. So this, of course, is our water, right? This water runs this entire facility, actually, which is pretty impressive. There's more room here if we need to expand it capabilities-wise, but there's also potentially room for not a huge dock here, but maybe a smaller one. The largest dock, you have to go to here, and we would have to basically destroy or maybe try to squeeze in distributed the water. It's possible, it's not ideal, but we can definitely already get a 4-module dock in here, right? So we have some optionality about what to use this for in the future. One of the things I'm thinking about actually is bringing back that sulfur for coal trade, not because we don't have uses for sulfur, but because we have to pause this because we're full on sulfur, but we don't necessarily have all the ammonia we want. I mean, we have enough here, but if you sort of think about what's likely to happen here, there's an imbalance, right? And so having an outlet for that excess sulfur that is productive and helpful in this area, bringing coal down here, there's an argument for it. So we'll keep an eye on things and we'll use this in the future. There's also obviously plenty of space in some of these other areas for a few machines here and there. So that all feels fantastic. We're very pleased, I think, with how this area cleaned up and turned out. So a couple other random updates though. We have started having to make graphite again. We've been slowly but surely, over time, burning down. There was an inflection point, I guess, around here, where, of course, we started making a ton of it by processing all of our exhaust, But over time, the capacity that we added for smelting was largely arc furnace 2s. And so that pace slowed and then peaked and then turned down into, well, yeah, we're kind of out. And so, that trajectory is why we saved all of this ridiculous, back to back to back 5x storage. But fortunately, we can remove all of that now. And I added, remember there's the original old school way to produce graphite is coal plus chlorine equals pretty decent volumes of graphite plus sour water. So we do that over here. This now actually exports graphite to the rest of the base where it needs it, in addition to all the places we're still scrubbing. It's not that we weren't making any, it's that we just weren't making enough anymore. So this is all that's necessary to supplement that. We were already using chlorine out here for plastic and for wastewater treatment. Plus there's coal here already so that you can make filter media. So it seemed like a logical spot to just slap down a couple of these chemical plant 2s and then run the sour water right across the street over to the refinery where we're already processing. And we already have, by the way, excess capacity so that we can run this extra contract when we need it. We've had it paused for a pretty decent while now, for whatever that's worth, but we're happy we have it and we'll certainly make use of it in the future as well, I'm sure. One other thing I'm realizing is that our spent MOX, at least on this readout, is looking pretty full compared to our available storage, and yeah, wouldn't you know it? So I think we're gonna need to get ourselves another one of these until we are able to reprocess it into another better fuel, but we are not there yet. So I think we're going to have to kick that can down the road, but obviously this lasted us quite some time, so another one won't go amiss. No problem there, but thought I should call that out quickly as it's something we are definitely gonna need to do. The next things that we want to do beyond that though, I think while I've been out here in this area a lot, I've noticed we pretty much have to, like, about half the time, boost this whole quartz crushing process. We don't make nearly enough sand without boosting it. Of course, we're crushing quartz, as you can see from this mine. We are crushing a lot of quartz to make all the sand we need. But this needs to be a better, higher throughput setup. I don't want to be spending Unity on this. I don't want to have to babysit it, frankly, is the biggest problem. And why don't we merge that with this limestone setup over here in a single, larger ore sorter, right? That's what these are for. If we have 4 of these, we should probably think about adding, basically, this is the employment equivalent of 5, but it's the throughput of 10. So we're close enough that we should probably just do that. So we'll do that here. This whole island is slowly but absolutely surely going to get crushed and then kind of merge out as we fill this bay in to out here. We'll probably just keep going into that limestone once we can reach it through the water. So we'll need to add this as sort of like the last, I guess, sort of the terminus of our waterfront area here. So I'll make sure to do that real quick. It's just this, but twice. You've seen it before. I'll show it off when it's done. I don't think you need to see me do it. And then the other thing I want to do, I just started doing this. I just deleted these, but I kind of want to clean up this old power plant area. It's just not as important anymore as it once was. We'll keep the power, but I might just sort of tidy things up a little bit. I also started cleaning up in this area. There is no longer a train station here, as you can see, because we don't actually need to drop copper ore off here very often. With our latest recycling technology, we're actually running on recyclables pretty continuously, like to the point where I'm actually a little worried this is backing up, and then I might actually have to run some out here too. So this is here as a backup, but like just as a backup, really. I mean, you can see downstream of our little priority sorter here, it's just always sending our recyclables, which is great. That was, again, one of the technologies we just researched the latest and greatest of, right? There's still one more after further in the space research, but we're pretty dang close to maxing out our recycling efficiency, which is really good because it's basic ore spending avoidance, right? So here, obviously it saves us on copper ore, but it also saves us on the sand, and it's less coal, for example. This is in the blast furnace, but there's a similar savings using recyclables in most every other basic processing as well. Same thing here, right? No limestone. So the more you can recycle, the better. It's only costing us a little bit of unity, which we certainly have. So we'll continue to make sure that we are maximizing that. We've definitely had to deal with a bit of recyclables overflow, especially while we have research going. This just really churns them out. And frankly, so does our settlement at this point. So I started to add a little bit of an overflow here, and then asked our trucks to kind of run the surplus when we have it over here. But this guy's getting pretty full now too. Rub it. Since we said, or as we said, 55%. So I actually think that I'm not going to do it right away, but we probably need to add at least one of these, if not two. So I will give some thought to that. But as I'm looking at it, right, this area that we've started cleaning up and we'll continue to clean up over here might make some sense. It's still pretty close to the downtown where both these things are being recycled and where we will smelt the recyclables. So we'll think about it. But it might be here. The other thing that we're actually kind of hurting on is glass, which is pretty wild. We haven't had to deal with glass troubles this entire game, but this is no longer a wildly overbuilt module. It's having trouble keeping up. Part of that is it goes into the vehicle parts, right, that we are very continuously producing for export. And so that's really cranked up consumption there. Also of steel and also of electronics, and therefore copper, but we kind of already had a decent baseline of consumption there, so it didn't take us as much by surprise. But glass is actually hurting a little bit. So we'll have to think about whether we need to reinforce some of this. I've been, as you can see with steel here, going back to boosting. This is why I still like having at least some capacity in blast furnaces this late in the game. But yeah, I think that's basically where we're at. And then the last thing that I'll probably try to do too is, in fact, let's just do it. We just researched the last ship upgrade as well. So now we can double up on guns and we go from 560 to 900. Plus we increase our range, which means we can start firing whatever our gun size or damage is. We can start firing before the enemy can. And the damage is like 2x almost. So this is pretty good. We like this. This will allow us to finally address this outer rim of last few places. And then, I mean, there's no use for our ship after that. He can still donate to villages and all sorts of other stuff, but that'll be it for combat, which is kind of impressive. We're definitely towards the end of the game. We are definitely towards the end of the game. Okay, so I'm gonna get all that sorted in addition to this food train station, right? That's the last big piece we want to get sorted today. But I will check back in shortly. You really should expect this to be more or less just copy paste, moved here, attached to markets. It won't be more complicated than that. The other thing to do, of course, will be to give a bypass turnaround. Although I will say that the traffic has gotten a little bit better already because we no longer have copper trains coming in here. We no longer have coal trains coming in here. It hasn't solved it, to be clear. We're still going to do more. But I think what it's done is reinforce in my mind, yeah, this is definitely a traffic problem, right? So the throughput has gotten a little bit better here, and it's made me feel like, okay, yes, we are definitely producing enough. We're still full out here in most things. Not everything, but most things. So let's get the turnaround or the return bypass as well, and I think we'll be in a pretty good spot. Cool. Well, more soon. All right, so we have an upgraded ship. Let's send her out on the world map. About there, I guess. Why not? And while that's going on, I can show you, we're still paving over here, but I can show you the expanded professionalized mining setup that we have going on over here. So each one of these, you have to crush twice quartz to get to sand. Each one of these does 288, which means that there's 3 crushers downstream of that for the second step. So 2 to 6, 3 to 1. We're bringing in a pretty good amount of quartz. We're keeping up here, and the limestone is also coming over. Let's take a look at that battle. Wow. Yep. That went okay. And since we have the fuel tank, I think we can even stay out. So we're exploring that settlement now too. Good stuff. We did end up doing the overflow sulfur for coal setup here as well. I think it's just a good safety valve. This settlement indeed has all of the uranium contracts we need. Good. This is the last one that we didn't have access to and that we were gonna be a little concerned about if we didn't find. So that is because we are almost halfway through this uranium mine out here. Very good. All right, well, I'll keep poking around on the map with the ship, but I have started clearing out this area. As soon as this hydrogen is gone, it'll be time to move the train station over. See you in a moment. Hey folks, just hopping in here real quick to show off. I did end up adding a bit of recycling capability. So this new 4th plant now will be here to receive from everywhere else. So it's not connected directly to anything. This one will still handle everything directly coming from the maintenance. And over here, these two will be directly connected to the research lab and settlement. However, we have our overflow. And in addition, we have, for example, out here, right, some rogue random recyclables that also need collected. If and when we turn the office back on, same thing, just run that across the street here. So these will collect everything here. This will be sort of the overflow catch-all for whatever's left over. It will sort, and it will actually just spit back out onto the same, sorted and then to be sorted into buckets row, right? And the throughput here should be fine because these belts are 450. And so as long as a recycling plant doesn't spit out more than 225, which no, it doesn't. It handles 144 at max. We'll be fine. So I'm going to go ahead and set all this up and get back to the rest of the work, but this should save us from wasting on recyclables. Be right back. And there, I think this is it functional. Obviously still some tidying up to do, but this is it. We've moved over, we pipe directly, we belt directly, and our trains have their own dedicated line on the way back. And they have, of course, their own competition between the 2 lines and the multiple trains on each line. But other than that, they are completely devoid of competing traffic. The only spot, I guess, is that this is where they come back and merge. So they'll have to handle that, but it was going to have to cross somewhere. So I think this will do for now. I feel like we were able to draw this a little bit more cleanly. I would love like a parallel tracks tool. I think that'd be great. Although obviously this had to come up and over one way or another. But we just brought it down in here square. The fun part, of course, was running around these belts to cross to the other side, but it's doable. It's a little messy, but it's doable. So yeah, feels good. We have over here, we have 2 for fruits. Each one of these is a double up on each of these snacks, so double sausage, double eggs, double meat, double snacks. Here, because there's a flat good and a loose good entry for each, and you don't want them competing. You don't want to put two different flat goods into the same market, or they will inevitably, one will back up the other, and then you'll have the second one, but not be able to actually get into the market because it's backed up. So I try to do one per. So I split corn, because it's a pretty good carb, across these 4, and potatoes across these 4. These 2 get tofu as a flat good, these 2 get veggies as a flat good, these 3 get bread as a flat good, and this 1 gets cake as a flat good. Now those allocations don't at all impact the consumption rate, right? This is just about distribution. And avoiding that annoying little reminder that only counts what you have inside your markets, even if there's an enormous storage right next to it. So I like to have a few of those at least. So yeah, I mean, this is going to take a moment to move everything over and then rebuild these buffers, but I think we're in a pretty good spot here on this front. We'll let this keep working. Let's get our ship back out onto the map. She did this whole pass on 1 fuel tank before having to come home. That's pretty good, honestly. So send her out this way, see what we find there. And the other thing I think we should think about doing is expanding our data center setup. So we're fine on production, it's just that we can very rarely, although right now is an exception, we can very rarely provide continuous internet. Plus, as we continue to free up people, wouldn't it be nice to add this back while this takes computing? We should just have something that's a little bit more extendable. And I was just thinking, it really just needs water, right? As far as input recipes go. And I've been playing around with solar up here, as you can see, just keep on adding them. And, we're really starting to scale up here, and it's definitely having an impact. We're almost generating 1% of our power from it. But I started thinking we should use this plateau for things that don't have to be near our other supply chain stuff. And then I realized, / remembered, oh yeah, there's a groundwater deposit right here, and there's nothing we're using it for. So might make a distant little data center out here. Here, maybe up here. I think down here, it's still a little bit more accessible. So I think I might play around with that while we are waiting for food to equilibrate and make sure that we haven't totally screwed anything up. Connect a couple last little pipes here, maybe tidy some belts. But yeah, so I'm gonna maybe mess around with that, and I will pop back in here in a moment and show it off. See you soon. And we're back. Things are looking pretty good. I didn't even have to add any trains. It really was just traffic. The trains we had were in fact sufficient. They just got caught. And so they were only really doing 1 trip out of every 3 that they were actually capable of. So even though there's apparently even a little bit of traffic here anyways, this is so much better. We are full up to the gills on most stuff and will be soon on the rest, which is obviously a great feeling. So food resolved, power resolved, refinery balance very much resolved. This whole area completely remodeled, balanced, more smooth, feels fantastic. We have electronics going wild over here, even our most advanced stuff. I literally can't spend these fast enough. I have upgraded and am boosting our server production because we just have these to spare. Now, we're not researching anything, which is really part of that, but still, it's the smoothest our production has felt the entire time. And speaking of server production and the fact that this is paused, and in fact, if you look inside, empty, the racks are gone, I am excited to show you our new data center. I am, calling this Coal Ridge because it's right across from our big coal mine on the ridge. Who knows? If you got a better name, post it. But this will eventually be a 3 petaflop compute capacity data center, roughly speaking, if my calculations are correct. I moved all of the servers we already had up here, so this is a 1-to-1 replacement. But then I've just been adding these in, and we are just way above what we actually need at this point, which is brilliant. We're providing the internet with ease, and it's not even taking the water that's here. So this is pretty cool. It's a bit of an outpost, but it's a great idea or a concept for an outpost, in my humble opinion. And we'll keep adding to it. Maybe we'll put some other cool high-tech stuff out this way. But yeah, it's we're in a pretty good spot. The other thing that I managed to do, I saved the last one for you, but we are pretty much done with battles on the world map. So we'll let her get out there, do one last big combat, and then we'll probably call it. I do think, rather than using this, I think we'll probably recycle this, and when we actually start researching again, we're going to need more recycling still, I think. I might turn this into a bit of a recycling center. Haven't decided yet, but I think it's a better use for the space, because again, these can go anywhere, and that's just such a cooler spot for it. So I think that's probably the play. But yeah, we're full up on pretty much everything. Our steel is, I mean, we're staying boosted here, but it's keeping up. So's copper, so's electronics too. Everything is really smooth. I feel like our economy is in exactly the spot we needed it to be to advance in the following episodes. So we'll start doing some titanium, some electronics 4, all that stuff. But here it is, last one. What you got, Bertha? Cruiser and a patrol ship? I mean, come on. No chance. Are they even going to get a shot off? Maybe not. Ah, there. We took 2 hits, 3 hits, and that's it. Final location. That's all of the map, fully explored. Every battle taken. There are plenty of mines out here that we haven't even touched. We certainly could. There's no reason not to take advantage of them, even if they are finite. But our contract setup really means that we don't need to. And it's kind of even cheaper from a manpower and Unity perspective, as long as we're able to keep the export manufacturing going, and so far, not been a problem. So I think we're in a pretty good spot here. Last little overview, I was still tweaking this area, playing around with it a bit when the last bits of progress were complete, so reserve the right to keep messing around here, but ultimately, you know, sort of fleshed this out a little bit, simplified, removed that steam battery experiment we did that did not really play out the way we hoped it would, and sort of trimmed down. Obviously, the fact that we aren't storing piles of graphite out here makes things simpler. That paused low pressure turbine too that was taking up space finally got removed, and we shifted everything else down. So yeah, feeling pretty good. I feel like the base is in very good shape, both economically and just kind of a clean layout. It's always a work in progress, but it feels as clean as it's looked, I think, really the whole playthrough so far. So feeling good about it. And we've managed to keep some of these trains. You know, we had to do something about the traffic through this area, but I'm glad that we didn't totally end up removing all of them. You gotta have, the city's gotta feel alive, you know? And up and down, what is this, Front Street? If this is Broad, up and down front feels pretty cool. I have a few more decoration ideas. I want to get further into that now that we're sort of at the very end of the game as well. So we're gonna mess around with that a little bit too going forward. But hopefully this is a half decent first pass for now. So very cool. Sort of a fun Zen Garden episode, for me at least. I hope it was for you too. but I certainly enjoyed myself, and I think this just feels like we're in a really good spot now. So I am pleased. But yeah, I enjoyed myself, and as always, I hope you did too. And if you did, of course, come on by again for the next one. See what we get up to. I think it might be titanium, but let's find out. Until then, though, have a great rest of your day, and bye-bye.